Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is the podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. I am so blessed and so happy that you decided to stop. You have so many choices, but you decided to stop and listen today. I'm going to make it really worth your while because I have another great leader. He's a performance coach. He's an author and the author of Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game. He's also a keynote speaker, and you are just going to feed off of his energy. I'm talking about Alan Stein Jr. And Alan Stein Jr. joined me today. And wait till you hear his take on developing great personal habits, how your mindset plays into everything you do, how you develop that great focus as well as discipline. And oh, by the way, he worked with Stephen Curry, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant. He knows them all. And so wait till you hear the advice that Alan has to give. You don't want to miss a second. Let's get at it.
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I'm so excited to have this guest with us today. Performance coach, author, and keynote speaker Alan Stein Jr. has joined me today. And Alan is such a great leader, but he is going to get into some real specifics on how you can just up your game in a lot of different aspects. So Alan, welcome so much. How you doing, sir?
I am fantastic. I'm excited to be with you, and I'm looking forward to a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to start with your backstory. I found it to be amazing. I'm sure everybody else will as well. And there's something about being kind of from a student teacher to doing what you're doing now. So walk us through what led you to do what you're so passionate about now, which is really helping so many other people.
Sure. So for context, basketball was my first love and my first passion. And I fell in love with the game at 5 years old. And I'm so thankful that here, 4 decades plus later, basketball is still a major pillar of my life. And, I was able to be a fairly accomplished player, public school player here in the Washington, D.C. area, and then was able to earn a scholarship to play at Elon University down in North Carolina. And while I was at Elon, and keep in mind, this is in the early to mid 90s, I started to develop an equal love for what we now call the performance side of training, the strength and conditioning and fitness and nutrition and mindset. So when I graduated from Elon in the late 90s, I figured what could be better than combining my first love of basketball with this newfound love of performance training. So I decided to become a basketball performance coach. And I did that here in the DC area for almost 20 years and chose to specialize primarily at the youth and high school level because that's where I felt I could make the biggest impact. I was able to work for 2 different high schools here in the DC area that have produced dozens of current NBA players. Kevin Durant and Victor Oladipo being 2 of the most notable. And because I was able to work at those 2 schools, I was able to earn some work with Nike and Jordan Brand and USA Basketball. And I got to work events for guys like Kobe Bryant and Stephen Curry and LeBron James and Steve Nash. So I had a very unique position to see both what it took for a player like Kevin Durant to ascend to the top of the mountain, but I also got a peek behind the curtain of what it took from already established players like Kobe and LeBron to stay there and to sustain excellence. And I'm a very observant person by nature, so I was taking note of all of the strategies and lessons and disciplines that they would share. And then in 2017, I made a very distinct pivot to leave the basketball world and the training world and enter the corporate keynote speaking game, which is what I currently do as a speaker. And I share all of the mindsets and habits and routines and lessons that I learned from the game of basketball. I now teach leaders, business leaders, executives, entrepreneurs, managers, supervisors. I teach them how to apply those same principles to the work that they do and have an absolute blast doing it. And I'm really thankful for every opportunity I get to share, whether it's on stage, on page, or in a podcast setting like this.
Wow. What an amazing journey you've had. And so what are some lessons? What's a couple of quick lessons? And I really want to get into the meat of what you talk about, which is unbelievable. What are some lessons you learned along the way from maybe someone that was established already, like LeBron James? What's one or two things that really stuck out for you?
Well, there's three that stick out immediately, and these are applicable to all of us, whether you're in basketball or business or anything in between, whether you're a team player or you have a position of leadership. These three principles apply. The first is the lesson I learned the first time I met Kobe Bryant, when he said something to me that really changed my life. He said that the best never get bored with the basics. Wow. So the first lesson is having a relentless commitment towards mastery of the fundamentals. Now, in the game of basketball, the fundamentals are shooting, passing, rebounding, defending, and handling the ball. In business or in leadership or in sales, folks need to drill down and get clarity on what their fundamentals are, on what the basics are that they need to work towards mastery of, so that they can make a maximum contribution to everyone and everything around them. So the first is never getting bored with the basics. The second is learning how to blend confidence with humility. It's earning the right to be confident because you've put in the work during the unseen hours. You've gotten in the repetitions. You've made the sacrifices. You've done the heavy lifting. You've earned the right to be confident at your craft. But brushing that with a major stroke of humility, which is what keeps you open to still being coached. Humility keeps you open to feedback. And most importantly, humility is what reminds you that no matter how good you get, you can still get better, that we never actually reach our potential. There should always be a gap between what we're capable of and what we're currently doing. But the world's highest performers and the world's most effective leaders try to narrow that gap to a razor thin edge. And then the third is learning how to respect, engage, and love the process. It's really important for leaders, for managers, for supervisors to have crystal clear goals for them and those that they lead. But once you've gotten clarity on the goal, you can take your eye off of the goal and put it on what's right in front of you. Put it on the next action step. Put it on the daily behaviors and habits and mindsets. Put it on the micro skills that you need. Focus on what needs to be done now to systematically, progressively, and incrementally inch you closer to that goal. And the best analogy I can think of when it comes to process versus outcome is if you're ever asked to build a brick wall, don't spend too much time worried about the wall. Put most of your attention into laying bricks with as much care and precision as you can. Because if you lay each brick with care and precision, and you put each brick exactly where it needs to go, the wall will take care of itself. Now, you do have to have a rough idea of how long the wall needs to be, how tall it needs to be. So you have to have the vision and you need to have the goal. That's what helps provide clarity and direction. But once you've got that, focus on the bricks. And it's the same thing in any area of business. Any goal that you want to achieve, focus on the action steps and the daily behaviors that will increase the chance of doing that. And if you can focus on those three things, that will already put you in the 1% club of high performers in the world.
Well, I love all of that, Alan. And it is just so dead on. You know, being I'm as big a basketball fan as you are, I probably am as well. And I go back further than you. I go back into the 70s and my New York Knicks when they were winning championships.
Yeah.
But I'd read a story about Kobe Bryant, and it was actually Allen Iverson who related. They were at an all-star game together, and after I guess the festivities the night before, Iverson said, "Hey, let's go to a club," and Kobe's like, "I'm going to the gym," And when you talked about unseen hours and the humility to be able to still take direction and feedback, it is so relevant for leaders today that lose that. Once they have a couple of months of success, they even lose that. And you see such a world-class athlete like Kobe or LeBron James and Allen Iverson was great in his own way, but I think he also didn't win any championships, and Kobe won 5, so there's a big difference there. Let's get into, as we're on that topic, you talk a lot about personal habits, and let's get into 4 or 5 of the things that you really go deep on. Talk to us about personal habits. How do we get into, first of all, really good habits and then really maintain those?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And right before I do that, I just want to put a pin in something that you just said, that the best leaders in the world are always learning. They have an insatiable thirst for getting better, for improvement, for involvement. They have that student first mentality, and it doesn't matter how many championships they've won or how many accolades they've earned or how long they've even been in the business. They're constantly leaning in with fascination and curiosity because they want to keep learning. And it's been my experience that's a common thread amongst all high performers. And it's an absolute non-negotiable for anyone that's in a position of leadership. When we start to become critical and judgmental and make assumptions, instead of leaning in with a youthful curiosity and fascination, that's when we start to stagnate. So one habit, if you will, of all the most effective leaders is they value learning and growing and improving, and it's almost insatiable. And that's something I've tried to carry with me my entire life, is this student first mentality. As far as other habits, and let's just look at a habit as being something we do unconsciously and something we do consistently. It's kind of the operating system at which we use to navigate the world. And we can have habits for our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, if that's appropriate to the people listening. And we have to have very high discernment and high discipline in creating these habits. They don't just happen magically or accidentally. We have to create them with intention. And the exercise that I use with most groups, and one more thing for context, I read a study several years ago that said almost half of everything we do from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed is habitual. I mean, think about that. Think of all the things that you and I and your listeners do in a given day. Almost half of those, we've created some type of repeatable, borderline predictable behavior that we're doing every single day. And the thing that unites these things is they give us some level of comfort. Now, some of these habits we can just call them positive habits that are taking us closer to the person we're trying to become. And some of them, I think we can all acknowledge, are things that don't serve us very well. We all do things that undermine our ability to be the best version that we can. And I think it's really important to note that I don't want anyone listening to this to use perfection as their yardstick. I mean, even though this is the stuff I preach and teach, I'm far from perfect. I mean, I'm fallible and flawed just like everybody else, and I don't have perfect habits. Now, what I can say is I've slowly over time refined many of my habits so that my habits today are better than they've been at any other point in my life. So I can say with a huge smile and a tremendous amount of pride, I'm going in the right direction. And that's the most important part to me. So I encourage folks to not worry about where you are in the moment, but focus more about the direction at which you're heading. And then just make sure that every day and week and month, you're intentional and cognizant about slowly leveling up your habits. Well, the best exercise that I encourage folks to do is at some point over the next few days of listening to this, take out a piece of paper and draw a vertical line down the middle. And on the left side of the paper, create an exhaustive list of the things that let's just say, fill your bucket. The things that give you energy, that make you feel alive, that light you up, that get you excited. These can be things, as I said before, for your physical, your mental, your emotional, or your spiritual. But they're the kind of things that when you do them, you feel invigorated, you feel energized, you feel optimized, and you feel confident. So come up with a list of those things. And it could be taking a yoga class or jumping on your Peloton bike. It could be meditation or prayer. It could be listening to an awesome podcast like this. It could be enjoying the stillness of the early morning while you sip coffee and read the paper. It could be conversation with a loved one, whatever it may be, but get crystal clear on the things that fill your soul and make you feel alive. Then on the right side of that line, on the other side of the paper, write down how you've been spending the bookends of your day, your morning and your evening routine. What do you typically do for the first 60 minutes after you wake up? And what do you typically do for the 60 minutes before you go to bed? And you need to do this with some honesty and some vulnerability, so don't write down what you think you should do or what people on Facebook say you should do. Write down what you actually do. And then to complete this audit, you're going to compare the two sets of notes. And you're going to ask yourself one of the most important questions you can ask yourself when it comes to leveling up your individual performance and contribution. And that is, am I doing the things I know I need to do in order to be my best self, in order to feel alive and to be vibrant and full of energy? And if you do this with some honesty and some vulnerability, you'll most likely uncover what's called a performance gap. And a performance gap is the gap between what we know we should do to be our best self and what we actually do on a day-to-day basis. And the key to leveling up performance and actually achieving true fulfillment is starting to narrow that gap, is starting to care enough about yourself, about those that you lead, and about the group that you work with, that you start taking things from the left side of the paper and you start integrating them into your morning and evening routine so that you can show up, as the best version of yourself, full of energy. Because that really is the number one commitment that all leaders need to make, is I make the commitment to show up every single day full of energy and optimism and ready to be the best version of myself so that I can pour into those that I lead. And this adage has been around a lot longer than I've been breathing, but you can't pour anything out of an empty cup.
Right.
If your cup is empty, you have nothing to give others, and you're not able to be of service to others. So rule number one of leadership for any manager or supervisor listening right now is you need to make sure your cup is full as consistently as possible so that you have the most to give. And that won't happen by accident. It needs to happen by intention.
Yeah, I love every second of what you said, and it's a great exercise. I wanted to ask you this because I love that you mentioned end of day as well, where I hear most people talk about, hey, start your day this way. Talk about that beginning and that end and why they are so important.
Well, they're inextricably linked. I mean, it's kind of the chicken and the egg, Everybody talks about the morning routines and how important the morning routine is. And it is important. But what comes before the morning routine is the previous night's evening routine. And the number one goal of that is to make sure that we're getting a high quality level of sleep. I know sleep is not sexy. Sleep's not going to sell a lot of books or get a lot of people to tune into a podcast, but sleep is arguably the number one performance hack, not just for our physical well-being, but for our focus, our mental acuity, our emotional capacity. I mean, just think, anytime that we're lagging in sleep, anytime, that we're feeling run down and tired, we become grumpy, we become irritated, we're not able to focus, we have low energy. I mean, all of those things directly detract from your ability to lead effectively and to have high personal influence and impact. So sleep is the number one thing that we can do. And our evening routine should contribute to getting a higher quality level of sleep. And that's also a time to spend with family and friends and loved ones. But we should be very strategic, and each person should try and unpack and create a bedtime routine. We do this for children inherently. Anyone listening, if you have really young children, you probably have a bedtime routine with them. Yeah. And for most, at least when my kids were little, it involved, dinner and bath time and then story time and then lights out at a very specific time. And kids would, they'd start to learn that routine and they'd get quality sleep. But then for some reason, as adults, we abandon that. We stay up to wee hours of the night scrolling on our phones or watching something on Netflix. We go to bed at a different time every single night. We eat something really heavy right before we go to bed, which interrupts our ability to sleep. So I really want to encourage folks to be, somewhat religious and militant about creating a routine that allows them to sleep. And then, then you wake up feeling refreshed. You actually wake up excited to tackle your then morning routine, which will lay the foundation for everything else that you'll do that day.
Yeah, I am so glad as a successful leader you said all that, because, Alan, over the years, leaders have won it as a badge of honor almost that, I get very little sleep. I sleep 3-4 hours a night. That's it, and I used to always scratch my head and say, well, that's really not good. I mean, how long are you going to live?
Yeah, it's the wrong thing to brag about. It's funny. I know this piggybacks on what you said, and it's somewhat of a dark joke. I've often heard someone say, well, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Yeah. And I say, well, that's coming a lot sooner than you think because you're not sleeping. So when we look at our day, if you look at the day as a pie chart, and each thing that we could make a commitment to doing is a slice of the pie. I understand logically why people try to shorten the sleep sliver of pie, because they say, all right, I got 24 hours in a day. If 8 of that is for sleeping, and I feel like I don't have enough time to do everything else, then I'll just make the sleeping sliver smaller, which gives me more time. But as you just said, that's actually working in the wrong direction, because now the extra time that you have to devote to all of that, you'll have less energy, less focus, less mental clarity. You'll be a lesser version of yourself. Yeah. And as you just said so insightfully, it's simply not sustainable. We can do this in short doses. Going back to when you do have really young kids, often as the parents, your sleep does get interrupted when you have, a newborn or a toddler, but that's only a very small season of your life. If you're working to hit a deadline, or you're an entrepreneur with a startup, there might be a week or two where you do sacrifice sleep in order to accomplish a very short-term goal. But those are the exceptions, not the rule. And if you're able to bank enough sleep the vast majority of the time, then when you need to pull an all-nighter, like many of us did in college, you're able to do that occasionally, because you've built this sleep muscle, if you will. But anyone that's trying to sleep 2 or 3 hours a night for long periods of time will absolutely burn themselves out, and they'll be a less version of themselves while they're trying to accomplish something.
No doubt. No doubt. I'm so glad you hit on that. Mindset. You really also focus in on that. And so what leads to just the proper mindset, and then how do you maintain it?
Well, as you can see from the sign above my head, I want to try and help folks simplify success. So for me, a winner's mindset is simply making the commitment to do the best you can with what you have wherever you are. Like, that's it, full stop. I don't want to make it any more complicated than that. I'm a huge believer that complexity undermines execution. I mean, that's a really important note for any of your managers listening right now. If you want your teams to execute, then you need to do everything in your power to simplify what it is that you're asking them to do. Because the more complex you make it, the less likely it is to be executed or implemented. So for me, there's a lot of different ways to look at mindset, but for the most part, it's doing the best you can with what you have wherever you are. Now, the reason I love that as my own personal operating system is it automatically eliminates a trilogy of behaviors that undermine productivity, undermine performance, and undermine optimism. And that's blaming, complaining, and making excuses. I use absolutes very sparingly, but you will never, ever improve your situation, move yourself forward, or accomplish a major goal by blaming, complaining, and making excuses. So the sooner we can rid ourselves of the temptation to do that, it's almost like we're taking an emotional weight vest off. And when we do that, we become emotionally more agile. And if you're not emotionally agile, then you're emotionally fragile. And you can't lead a group somewhere that they've never been if you are emotionally fragile. And the last part of mindset, to me, that is the actual definition of mental toughness, is the ability to stay in the present moment amidst chaos. It's not about this tough guy approach or this tough guy attitude. It's simply, are you able to stay in the present moment when things get chaotic? When there's challenges and adversity and uncertainty, are you able to dial into the present moment and be fully present? And that certainly is one of my biggest challenges on a day-to-day basis, but it's a really important one. And it's about not getting too distracted by the past, not getting too anxious about the future, but learning how to be in the moment. Because in order to win the moment, you have to be in the moment. And being present is one of the most important mental characteristics that we can have if we want to perform at a high level.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And as you were talking, I was thinking about how many times I've seen Kobe Bryant hit that last shot, with on the road and in Madison Square Garden, with the crowd just, and just chaos around him, and just rising up and hitting that game-winning shot. And you just think about that type of focus that it takes to do that. It's amazing, but they're doing all the things that you just talked about.
Yeah. And and everything that we want to improve starts with awareness. So you'll never improve something you're unaware of, and you'll never fix something you're oblivious to. So having an awareness is always the first step to improvement. And when it comes to the ability to focus and being in the present moment, we have to have an awareness of when we're unfocused, of when our mind wanders, of when we're distracted. And then, and only then, can we refocus the lens and get back in the present moment. When Kobe was going to catch the ball with a few seconds left and try and knock a game winner down against your New York Knicks, he wasn't thinking about shots in the past that he had missed. And he certainly wasn't worried about what was going to happen if he missed. He was dialed into the moment, and he trusted the process. He reminded himself of all of the unseen hours that he put in to earn the right to hit this shot. And then he trusted that he would be able to make that play. And, that type of positive self-talk is the exact opposite of blaming, complaining, and making excuses. And it is just doing the best you can with what you have wherever you are. That is absolutely a championship level mindset.
No doubt. No doubt. Absolutely. Focus and discipline. I want to tie those two in together, Alan. hit us up with that, and how do you continue to maintain that? And I know that a lot, as I saw you speak a lot, I tie discipline also back in with personal habits, because we can get into those good personal habits, but after 30 days, we can lose them. The first thing might distract us all. Talk a little bit about why those two are so important to tie in together.
Well, I think the mistake most people make with discipline is they think that it's genetically encoded. They think it's preset the same way height or hair color has been preset. And it's not. I hear people say things all the time like, well, I'm just not a disciplined person. And I just remind them that that is not a fundamental truth. That's a story that you've told yourself. Now, you've probably told yourself that for so long that now you start to believe it. And you may have plenty of proof and evidence of times where you did not make a disciplined decision, but you can change that with the very next decision that you have to make. So every single person walking the earth has an opportunity to make a disciplined decision in whatever's coming up next in their day. I mean, the next meal that you plan to eat, you have the choice of making the more disciplined, in this case, healthy decision than maybe an alternative. Now, you have the right to choose whatever you want, and I'm not going to judge you no matter what you choose, but I just don't want someone telling themselves the story that they don't have that option. So discipline is all about making the best decision you can in the moment. Now, what happens is when you start to get pretty good at that skill and you start to make mostly disciplined decisions, it's funny, you start to rewire your brain to think the other side, which is what I think, which is I am a disciplined person. I make very disciplined decisions. I make them financially. I make them relationally. I make them in my fitness and my wellness. Now, once again, as I said earlier, I don't make disciplined decisions every time. And sometimes they're unconscious mistakes, and other times they're very deliberate. There are times where I choose to go out and have pizza with my children as opposed to eating something more nutritious and healthy, but I'm conscious of that decision. So I'm okay stepping out of the bounds that I've created in certain circumstances. But generally speaking, I choose to make mostly disciplined decisions in most areas of my life as frequently as possible. And because I do that, then I'm able to enjoy the benefits of that. I'm able to say with, a huge smile, and certainly hope it doesn't lack humility, I'm physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I have a great relationship with my children and family and friends and clients. I do work that I consider as meaningful and in service of others. And none of those things are accidents. All of those things are through intention and through making disciplined decisions. And my goal now is to continue to tweak and refine and level up so that I can get better in each of those areas. I certainly haven't maxed out any of those areas, but as I said earlier, I like the direction that I'm going.
Yeah, Alan, I love all that. And I want to throw in a quick question. When I have a leader that is a retail or a restaurant manager and they've got to make those decisions very fast, this seems like it plays in very well. Talk a little bit about that when you have to make those fast decisions and how you can keep those as disciplined as possible.
For sure. Well, part of it will come with experience. And of course, experience comes with time, and time comes with making plenty of mistakes. So, it's okay if you're a new restaurant manager, you're most likely going to make more mistakes more often than if you are a seasoned or veteran restaurant manager. So that certainly plays into an account. But the mindset that I use with that is something called next play. And next play is simply the refocusing of the lens on, don't worry about what just happened. Refocus the lens on what's about to happen next. So if you are a restaurant or a retail manager and you need to make a fairly quick decision and you realize that it wasn't the best decision, don't spend too much time worrying about it. Just quickly move to the next best decision that you can make. Now, later, you can debrief and you can unpack and you can look back and you can say, hey, that decision that I made earlier in the day was not in my best interest or the team's best interest. So let me unpack that and figure out what I could have done better. But usually in the moment, which I know is what managers are experiencing all of the time, especially in the restaurant industry, that is very high tempo, high pace. They need to be able to quickly refocus the lens on what's next. And you need to know that circumstances will rarely be perfect and you will rarely have all of the information, which means going back to the mindset, you just got to do the best you can with what you have wherever you are in that moment. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, trust your gut to make the best decision. And if hindsight proves that it wasn't the best decision, at a later time, you can learn from that, which will allow you to make even better decisions moving forward. But, very similar to basketball, one of the things that makes Steph Curry the greatest shooter to ever play the game, certainly he has some innate natural talent and balance and spatial awareness and ability. He has probably put in more reps during the unseen hours than any shooter in the history of the game. He has flawless form, but in addition to that, the thing that separates him the most is this next play mentality. Steph can miss the first 5 shots of a game. I mean, it doesn't happen often because he's really good, but he can miss the first 5 shots, but he doesn't let those 5 misses affect his 6th shot. He shoots that 6th shot with the same optimism and confidence and belief as if he had made the first 5. So he doesn't drag, previous outcomes into what's happening right now. He doesn't bring that negativity with him. And I would say the same thing to managers. Make the best decision you can with the information you have at present, and then be able to tweak and move forward accordingly.
Yeah, that is so awesome. Absolutely. And that, that takes away the, because I see a lot of leaders that are afraid to make a decision, or they're very tentative at it. I have one last question. Boy, I could talk to you. I probably have 50 more questions I can ask you. I could talk to you for the next week or so.
I know, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is, man. I tell you, I want to get this one though from you, because I love how you said, you talked about that development and self-development. So for you, what are some things that you do to develop yourself that helps your cup stay full? What are some things that you do every day that helps you develop?
Well, I'm a voracious consumer of content, and it's interesting. I was just having this conversation with my girlfriend the other day. Back in the early 2000s, right when I graduated college, I mean, I was a voracious reader. I set a goal of reading a book a week, and for the first 5 years out of college, I accomplished that. So, that's already 250 books, in 5 years. But when I think back to the early 2000s, podcasts and videos weren't near as prevalent as they are today. Like, books were one of the primary ways for us to take in new information. Well, now we're not limited by just books. I mean, we have podcasts like this, we have documentaries, we have videos. I mean, any topic you can think of that you want to learn, you can type that into the YouTube search engine and you'll have hours and hours and hours of content. And I've just noticed about myself that I'm not reading physical books near as often as I'd like to. I've kind of gotten away from physical books. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, a lot of audio podcasts, and I watch a lot of videos. But I want to start making a commitment to getting back to reading physical books. So I'm setting a goal, and I'm not waiting till January 1st to start this. I'm starting immediately, and that is just to simply read 10 pages a day.
Yeah.
And I've got a stack of books that I'm starting with right here sitting on my desk.
Wow.
Just 10 pages a day. Now, it doesn't mean I'll only read 10 pages. If I have more time and I'm in a groove, I might read 100 pages, but I'm not going to bed at night until I know that I have read at least 10 pages of a book. And I'm going to stick with that until it just becomes part of my routine again. My physical well-being routine has been honed pretty well. I mean, I eat really well. I exercise very often. I do hot cold therapy. I meditate. Like, I do a lot of different things for my physical and emotional well-being, but I need to get back to reading books. And that's going to be one of my commitments, is I'm not going to bed until I read at least 10 pages. And I'm going to do that long enough until it starts to stick. So, most of the things that I do on a daily basis fall under that self-care bucket, because it's really important for me to show up for everyone, including you and your audience right now, as the best version of myself. Because I respect you, and I certainly respect your audience's time and attention. And I feel indebted to always bring my A game. And that won't happen by accident. That only happens through intention and purpose.
Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you for saying that. And because you have to really keep yourself full, because you're definitely filling up a lot of others as well. I want to give you, you've got a couple of books out. Talk about those and how people can connect and contact you and work with you.
Sure. So my primary business is as a keynote speaker, and I do keynotes, I lead workshops, I do full day trainings, I do things virtually, I do things in person. So if anyone listening, if you think I'd add value to your organization, to your team, you can go to alansteinjr.com. That's kind of the hub of everything I have going on. There's a contact form you can fill out, and my team and I will get back to you immediately. I'm very accessible and responsive on social media. So Instagram, Twitter, I guess now it's called X, and LinkedIn. Just shoot me a DM on any of those platforms if you want to keep this conversation going or ask a question. Always love engaging with folks after they've listened to an interview. And then, as you mentioned, I do have 2 books. The first was called Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best. And the second was called Sustain Your Game, High Performance Keys to Manage Stress, Avoid Stagnation, and Beat Burnout. You can find either of those on Amazon or Audible or wherever you get books and audiobooks. So yeah, those are the easiest ways to get in touch with me. If I can ever add value, it's always my honor to do it. And yeah, nothing makes me happier than when a listener shoots me a DM or fills out a contact form and says, hey, I heard you on the show. Would love to have you deliver some of that to my team. That's always so much fun for me.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. You are amazing, sir. And you filled me up so much today. And I know you're going to fill up the audience when they get to hear this. Keep doing what you're doing. I have an off-topic quick question to end with, because I saw the picture with Kevin Durant, and he to me is probably the most underrated superstar in the NBA ever that I can remember. So my question with you living down there, why did the Wizards never make a play to bring this guy home? You know, and he would have just been fit down there like a glove, because he didn't fit that well up here in New York. You know, he just didn't like all the attention and everything. But boy, oh boy, down there, I think he would have, that team would have probably won a championship at some point.
Yeah, and you could probably say the same thing for University of Maryland. Like, how'd they let him out of state and end up at Texas?
Yeah.
I mean, he could have been one of the best to ever. And, you know, I had a chance to meet KD when he was 15 years old. And that's when I started working with him. And just what a remarkable young man. It's been a lot of fun for me to watch not only what he's been able to achieve on the court, you know, as arguably one of the best scorers the game has ever seen, but even off the court, you know, the way he has grown socially and, you know, everything that he does. He was an incredibly quiet and shy and introverted young man, was a man of very few words back in his teenage days. So now to see him on national commercials and holding press conferences and all, I'm just really proud of the person that he's become, in addition to the basketball player he's become.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, listen, Alan, keep doing what you're doing. We're going to leave it there. It has been an honor to have you on. Folks, this has been the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and with Alan. We'll talk to you real soon.